in what medical journal is it okay to take a healthy baby away from his mom and dad for an indeterminate amount of time, regardless of how many weeks you determine his age to be?
This is not going to be the easiest video to film or to talk about because it's a lot. There's a lot to talk about. I mean, I'm probably not even going to remember everything or share everything, but so Jake and I are going to film the birth story separately because we both have different views of it. You know, I have my side of the story and he has his side, and then we'll come together and talk more about it together. We have a baby. So this beautiful, beautiful baby boy was born early January. So I was early, so that kind of made my birth plans, or our birth plans, dramatically different. And even though it wasn't the birth that I wanted for myself or for my baby, you know, sometimes you just have to just do what's right for, you know, yourself and for your baby to make sure everyone is, you know, healthy and happy and comes out okay, you know, and that was the case. It was hard and sad and frustrating and very emotional, and it was a lot. It was a lot, you know, and I'll get into it here shortly. It was just a lot to process, and I'm still processing it. I might cry, but it was just a lot. It was a lot for our family to deal with, but I'm very, very grateful, and I'm very happy that he is healthy and strong and growing by the minute, and I'm healthy and strong, and I'm doing very well and healing very well physically, you know, and I'm very grateful for that. And you know, I'm grateful for Jake for being by my side, because he is my rock, and I honestly, I could not have done this without him. He really helped me a lot through this whole thing, so I'm very grateful for him, and I'm grateful for him. Let's get into my side of the birth story. Around 8 o'clock at night, I started feeling, you know, contractions, and I just... What? Are you chiming in? Yeah. So I just thought, oh, these are just practice contractions, Braxton Hicks, no big deal. They were very light, so I was just kind of, you know, adjusting my position, trying to get ready for bed, and I noticed that they weren't going away. They were getting a little more intense, and then, you know, I noticed some leakage, that just seemed different. The contractions just started getting heavier and heavier, and I was getting a little concerned. So I was, you know, Jake was in and out of sleep. You know, I kept telling him, don't worry about it, I'm okay. So I'd walk around the house, and then he would wake up and kind of help me and, you know, see if I'm okay. And then it was like maybe 1 o'clock in the morning. I haven't gone to sleep yet. I was still, you know, the rushes or the contractions were really high and low. Some were intense, some weren't, you know, on a scale from like 1 to 10 pain. I mean, it got to like maybe like 4.5, 5. So I was like, I don't think these are Braxton Hicks. They're not going away. Normally Braxton Hicks, you get in a different position, they go away, or you kind of walk around a little bit and they go away. So around 1 o'clock in the morning, Jake and I go outside for a walk. I was like, maybe I just need a walk. So like we walked, you know, down the street and then came back, and then I ended up texting my midwife when I probably should have called her, but it was, you know, like 2 o'clock in the morning, and I didn't want to disturb her because I didn't want it to be false and me just, you know, have her drive all the way up to where we are and have it just be, you know, nothing. Finally ended up going to sleep. They kind of subsided, so I was like, okay, thank goodness I didn't call her. She didn't text back, so I was like, okay, that's fine. Then I woke up maybe at like 6 in the morning, and they were back. Very mild, and my midwife texted me, or she called me, and she's like, oh, you should have called me. It doesn't sound like practice contractions. It sounds like something, you know, was happening. She told me to come see her, so I went to see her, and the drive to her was maybe about a half an hour. And oh my gosh, I was experiencing some rushes along that drive that were pretty painful. It was really uncomfortable to sit in the car. And we finally got there, and she kind of seen the shape I was in, and she just said, it's up to you, but you know, maybe going to the hospital, maybe to get like an IV of magnesium to kind of help slow the contractions down, to help slow the delivery down and all of that, and you know, might be a good idea. And that moment, it was just like, what do I do? Because I didn't want to go to the hospital. I didn't want to have a hospital birth. Hence why, you know, I have a midwife, a very beautiful midwife, and a really lovely home. And so it was really sad. I was really upset because I knew if I stepped through the doors of the hospital, it wasn't just going to be a magnesium drip to slow down what was happening. I knew that they were going to take me and start doing tests, and you know, I just knew that it wasn't going to be that easy. So we ended up driving to the hospital, and of course right when we walked in, they had me throw on a gown, they hooked me up to an IV, and they did test the fluids, and it was my water. But my water didn't like break like normal water would break, like it wasn't gushing. It was just a slow leak, so there was just like a small puncture in my water bag, so it was slowly leaking, which is cause for concern. You know, one of the nurses pretty much said, you know, game over when that happens. You know, she was really rude about it. I was just trying to hold it together. So where we are is it's still a pretty small town where this hospital is. And they told me that, you know, since I'm 33 weeks, I was telling them that I'm 33 weeks. So the whole pregnancy, I didn't get one ultrasound. Jake and I just used a fetal scope to hear the baby, which you guys have seen if you guys have watched our previous videos, to hear the baby's heartbeat. And I used a Doppler in my first trimester to hear the heartbeat, but I never used an ultrasound because I didn't want to, and you know, we weren't finding out the sex of the baby, so we just didn't want to. And so, you know, of course they were like, how could you not? But they pretty much said that I had to be life flighted to a bigger hospital, you know, in another town over. So many emotions, because they said that Jake couldn't come with me. So that was really hard because of COVID. So now I had to do this by myself, and I don't know, what do you do in that moment? Do you just say, nah, I'm okay, I'm gonna go home, and still go through the home birth, not knowing, you know, because he's still really little? It was just a decision that I had to make, not just, you know, for me, but for him. I was like, all right, let's do this. So when Jake and I had to say goodbye to each other, it was so emotional, and it was so hard. It was so hard. And he had to catch a flight to the bigger city, and there was only one flight left, and so he had like an hour and a half to get back to our place, which was a half an hour away, to pack a bag, to drop our dogs off with our really good friends of ours, and then come back down a half an hour down to the airport to catch that flight to go to the bigger city. It was just a lot, and if he would have missed that flight, then he wouldn't have gotten another flight until the next day. Just a lot. And this is only the beginning, guys. I'm gonna try to not make it so long, but it was just a lot. It was a lot. So Jake and I had to say goodbye to each other, and the ambulance guys are coming in to hook me up to get me on the gurney to go to the plane. And then I get on a plane. It's like it's not a helicopter, it's like a small medical plane.
How's Kevin feeling?
I don't know, I haven't talked to him.
Crazy that I just felt so helpless, even though I'm fit and I could have walked onto this plane. I had to get strapped down. I just felt weird. I felt like an alien when I knew that I could have walked. I don't know if that makes sense. So I'm in the plane, flying. It's about a half an hour flight to the city. Get there, have to get into another ambulance, and you know, still strapped down. Could barely even move my hands. They have a seatbelt over me, and get to the hospital, get in there, and yeah, and then I'm just kind of sitting there by myself in this room, in this city, in this hospital that I've never been to the city. just a lot of emotions. You know, I was just sitting there by myself like, oh my gosh, how did I get here? You know, it just happened so fast. I just kind of all sank in like, oh my gosh, I'm really here. I'm really at this hospital. Is my baby gonna be okay? Am I gonna be okay? And where's my partner? You know. Current situation. Unfortunately, I'm alone. What a journey. What a journey. Yeah, I had to get into an ambulance and then into a plane. It's a very, very small plane. It wasn't a helicopter. And then I had to get into another ambulance, and then now I'm here. Not what I was planning for my birth, obviously, but you know, as long as the baby is safe and I'm safe and healthy, that's all that matters. I just really want Jake with me, so I'm hoping that that can happen very, very soon. But right now I'm just by myself in this room. Yeah. So just praying for a healthy baby, which I have no doubt is going to be healthy. And I'm texting Jake the whole time saying, I made it, where are you? He made his flight, so I was like, oh my gosh, like that was a huge relief. So he gets to the hospital and now they're telling him that he can't come up to see me. I have to be by myself because of COVID or something like that, and yeah. So they're saying that he can't come into the room, but he was pretty much saying bullshit. And, you know, he pretty much kind of fought his way through, not physically, obviously. You know, he's saying that they won't let me up, like we're texting, and then all these nurses and doctors are coming in to finally talk to me, and I'm trying to talk to them and talk to Jake, and I'm trying to not lose my shit, honestly. I'm really trying to hold it together and not lose it, because my partner's not there. Like, I can't do this by myself, you know, and I'm having like minor contractions, and like there's just so much happening. And then all of a sudden I hear Jake's voice come through the door. Oh my gosh, I almost lost it. I was so excited. The doctors are still trying to talk to me, and I just started crying, and Jake comes in and just hugs me and kisses me, and oh, it was such a, that was a good moment. A win. So that was really nice to have him by my side. And so fast forward, all day Wednesday or the next day, whatever day it was, my contractions stopped, kind of. Like they were more far apart, but really they didn't hurt as bad as they did the night that the day that I went into the hospital. This little guy just wanted to come out, I guess. So the next day, you know, on Thursday, that morning, the contractions started again, getting more intense, more closer together. I was in labor for about 10 hours. I don't know if I mentioned this yesterday, but just before I left the small hospital, they did test me for COVID, and of course I came up positive for COVID, so that really made things more difficult. I was in an isolation room, and, you know, all the nurses had to get all dressed up head to toe. Even though I had no symptoms at all, I felt fantastic actually, except for, you know, getting ready to give birth. So yeah, there was just a lot. There was a lot. So they were saying another reason why I was trying to also keep my baby in, or keep him in, was because they said if I had him before my 5-day quarantine or whatever, you know, if I had him and I still wasn't out of that 5 days, then I couldn't go and see him in the NICU. They were going to take him from me, which was a lot to process while trying to like not go into labor. So mentally I was just like, stay in, you know. There was just so many people coming in, so many doctors we were meeting, and of course they're all covered. You can't see their face except for their eyes. You know, some were wearing glasses, plus shield, plus mask, plus another mask, and plus the whole getup. So I felt like an alien on an operating table. I felt diseased. The pressure that they put on me, the way that they made me feel was really, was crap. I spent all of Thursday just, you know, riding the waves. did it all natural. They kept pushing me to try to get an epidural or to take pain medicines. And nope, I kept saying no, leave me alone, stop asking. You know, let me make my sounds, let me do my practice breathing that I've been practicing for 9 months or for 8 months. You know, they did bring me a birthing ball, so I was able to be on that, which is really nice. Even though they told me not really to walk around because my cord, like my IV and my monitors on my stomach didn't reach that far, I would unplug them and walk around anyway. We weren't allowed to leave our room at all because we were contagious. Jake actually was negative for COVID. But he was in my bubble, so he wasn't allowed to leave. I just knew that the contractions were getting heavier and heavier, and you know, I was just so afraid to have him, which I shouldn't feel that way because I knew that they were going to take him away from me because he had to go to the NICU. It's just a lot to process. Like, you know, I was really excited to give birth and go through this whole experience, but they made me so afraid because then they were going to take him from me. And then we also had this battle with the doctor about keeping the placenta attached as long as possible. Like, if I was to do a home birth, we would have the placenta attached for 15 minutes to an hour. It depends on, you know, because the placenta is still, even when you give birth and the placenta comes out and you keep it attached, the placenta is still pumping blood to the baby and giving it all of its nutrients. Like, it's giving it the rest that it needs. And when it's done, you could tell when it's done, and then that's when you cut it. And, you know, of course, the doctor didn't want to do that. We kept saying, like, if he comes out breathing, if he comes out looking great, you know, what's the harm? Like, and then why would you need to take him away if he looks great? You know, they kept saying, like, oh, we're not in the business of separating families. Well, that was a little crap. I finally had to give in to my body and just say, okay, we are ready to have this baby. He's ready to come out. At the time, we didn't know what we were having. You know, the baby's ready to come out. I can't control the contractions anymore. I just have to give in and just let go. And once I did that, then the contractions really, you know, got heavier. We ended up having him at 8:51. He came out 5 pounds, 7.8 ounces. He came out perfect. He came out crying. He came out alert. He came out moving.
There we go. Deep breath, deep breath.
He came out just perfect. And of course, they cut the cord. Let me backtrack also. There was 8 people in the room. 8 people. People I had no idea who they were, except for Jake. That's the only person I knew. And that's a lot of people to have in the room that you don't know. Spread eagle, having this beautiful moment. Like, it was just so unfortunate. And they're, of course, they're all suited up, so I even feel more like an alien. I'm, you know, pretty much naked except for a gown, and I'm trying to push this baby out, and there's 8 people staring at me. It was so hard mentally to just focus and try to give birth, you know, naturally. I wasn't on anything. Like, I felt everything. You know, there's a lot of stuff that I'm leaving out in between, you know, with the doctors poking and prodding at me, and it's just, there's so much detail. I don't want this video to be too long because Jake also has to tell his side of his story, and there was just a lot. I got poked a lot with stupid IVs. I had to wear things. I just did not want to be in the hospital at all, and I just did not have a good experience. But I'm happy he's safe and healthy. I had him. He came out looking so beautiful, and it was just, I don't know how, like, I just feel robbed. I felt robbed of the moment because they wanted him. So there was just so much distraction that I felt robbed of the moment to see my baby for the first time. And it was just so frustrating. They didn't actually let me put him up on my chest, you know, they just had him down here, and then of course they let Jake cut the umbilical cord.
How long has it been?
Hi, baby.
Over a minute.
Oh.
Okay, we're gonna take him over there for the tea. Say bye.
And then they took him and they took him over to that, you know, table, and they cleaned him up and all this stuff.
We're getting him out to the monitor. He's doing everything himself.
But tell me what you think. Is he healthy?
He looks great. Look at him. He's
Thank
frank,
you.
he's screaming, he's vigorous.
I love it.
Can't ask for anything better.
But since he's so healthy, can we keep him with
No,
Nicolle?
because he's still premature. So
So what do you
he needs
think?
No,
Is it?
any baby under 35 weeks has to come to the knee. They just want to get contact information. That kind of stuff.
Good job, Mom.
He just looked at me and he was beautiful. And he had his eyes wide open, he was calm, and he was sticking his tongue out and moving it around like he was just ready, you know, for me to feed him. And then they had to take him, which is so harsh, so harsh. And it didn't even faze him, it didn't even, nothing. So I got to hold my baby for maybe like a minute. And then they took him from me. And we couldn't go and see him. Jake couldn't go because he was in my bubble. So my baby had to get wheeled away and I couldn't do anything. So I'm just laying there in the bed. I just felt so numb and trying so hard to stay positive. But it was really hard. It was hard also too because I just wanted this beautiful home birth and I didn't get that. Anyway, so they wouldn't let me see him for 3 days because that's when my quarantine was over. 3 days I could not see my newborn baby. They kept me from him for 3 days. Let me tell you, it was the longest and most painful and torturous 3 days of my life. So I got sent to a different room. Jake and I did. We got sent to a different room, a very small room. It was uncomfortable. It was like another isolation room. I was there for one more night, and then the next day we go and check into a hotel. I'm trying so hard not to get emotional. But leaving that hospital with no baby in me anymore and no baby with me, knowing I just went through all that and just like leaving the hospital empty-handed was so hard. I kind of feel bad for the Uber driver that picked us up and took us to the hotel because I was a mess. I was a hot mess. So we get to the hotel, which is like 5 minutes away from the hospital because we wanted to be close, obviously, and they wanted to have me start producing breast milk so they could feed it to him. So I'm doing everything I can, and Jake and I both are, you know, doing everything we can to get myself to start producing milk. We were an awesome team and using a breast pump and squeezing and scooping and getting every single little drop that we could get, like literally every drop we can get of breast milk. Every 3 hours or every 2 hours I was up pumping to try to get as much as I could, and Jake's hopping in an Uber at like 1 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning and taking over all of this, the colostrum and the breast milk when I finally started producing breast milk. And so yeah, I just had to wait at the hotel for 3 days, and it was in a weird time warp. It was just so weird. It was so weird to not have a baby, but I'm getting eaten alive by mosquitoes. So finally the 3 days was up. I was there a minute before midnight down in the lobby, 12 a.m. I'm ready.
What can we have here? So happy.
With Jake's case it was different. So the reason why Jake couldn't go with me was because it was so stupid. So he tested negative for COVID, and they still said no, that he couldn't go up there because my 5 days, when my 5 days was over, his 5 days started. How bizarre does that sound? How bizarre does that sound? And so he couldn't see him. So my 5 days was up, I could go see him, and then his 5 days started. Then before I got discharged, we asked the nurse, okay, so if he tests positive while I was still at the hospital, because my 5 days wasn't over yet, so like 2 days left. If he tests positive for COVID, then does his 5 days start the day he tests positive, so then he could see our son sooner? And they said, well, technically, yeah. So he went and took a test, and we were like praying that he would test positive for COVID so he can see our son sooner. And of course he tests negative, and that didn't matter. His negative COVID test did not matter. They still said, nope, when Nicole's 5 days is over, that's when your 5 days starts. So now Jake's taken like 4 COVID tests, and they were all negative, and they still wouldn't let him see him. I'm now in the NICU with him, thank God. You know, I'm there breastfeeding, and I'm finally there to see everything that they're doing to him without our permission. They gave him 2 COVID tests without us knowing about it. They were putting stuff in his nose without us knowing about it, like this cream stuff. There was just a lot, and we were in the NICU for about a week, and there were just so many nurses, so many doctors. He was healthy from when he came out of me. He was perfect. He was crying. He was ready to latch. He was holding his temperature. Everything that they wanted to see, he was doing, and they still kept him in there. And of course, if he wasn't holding his temperature, if he looked sick, if he looked, you know, like he couldn't breathe, or he needed to be on oxygen, I would be like, oh my gosh, you know, he needs to stay in here, do everything you guys can to make sure he's okay. But it wasn't like that at all. He was holding his temperature. He didn't need oxygen. He was breathing right away. He was latching onto me the first time that we tried to breastfeed together. He did amazing. And then they took him off the IV, and he was just fine after that. So like there was no reason. There was no reason for him to be in there. Even some of the nurses said, because you know, I would break down and start crying of like, why are we in here? Why is Jake not with his son? Jake, like, how is this okay? How is he not home with us? One of the nurses said, you know, I don't know why you're in here. Honestly, I would have sent you home a long time ago, or not even had your baby in here. So when like a nurse says that to you, like that's even just like, what is happening? Why are we in here? This is why I don't like the hospitals. Unless you really need it, you know, like unless he really needed it, and he didn't. It was just a lot to process. It was a lot. There's way more like little small details of how they treated me and how I felt, and how I don't even want to talk. I just don't even want to tell this story. But he's healthy, he's beautiful, he is just everything I ever wanted and more. And Jake and I are a very happy family, and things are going really well. I'm doing really well physically, and we couldn't be happier, honestly. We are so happy to be back here on our property. As you guys will see, we had a very beautiful rebirth ceremony here on our property with flowers, and you know, Jake and I said some words and poems and quotes, and we burned everything from the hospital, from our medical bracelets to his medical bracelets to the stupid umbilical cord clamp that they put on him, and just all the disgusting stuff that had to be on him. We burned it, which felt really nice. It felt like, okay, slowly releasing more of everything. He was born on a Thursday, 5 pounds, 7.8 ounces, and very active. He is, I don't know, he's just great. And he has a lot of hair. Yeah. And he loves to make a lot of noises, and he squeaks a lot. And yeah, he's just perfect. I love him so much. So yeah, that's all I'm going to share. And we'll just get on with the video, have you hear Jake's side, and we'll reveal his name and everything. And yeah, I love you guys.
So no matter what happens to me, you remember that nature loves courage. If you make the commitment, then nature will respond to that commitment by removing impossible obstacles. Dreaming the impossible dream and knowing that the world will lift you up is what all of the ancient teachers and philosophers understood. They knew that by hurling yourself into the abyss, you will discover it's a featherbed. Hey, so I know Nicolle told her birth story to you guys, and I don't really know what I'm doing here with this video, so maybe I'm just speaking to the guys out there from a guy's perspective. Even though I wasn't the one who was pregnant or carrying our baby, I think Nicolle's the rock star. So really her take of her birth story is what you want to listen to. But maybe doing videos like this, since I've done YouTube since 2007, are cathartic for me and kind of, you know, therapy for me. So maybe I'll just kind of voice my opinion of our birth story, and you guys can skip ahead or you can listen and think what you want. I just feel that I need to kind of burn my thoughts, and this video is a way for me to burn my thoughts. And what I mean by that is I'm going to tell you guys what I experienced over the course of almost the 3 weeks that Nicolle and I gave birth, and I just hope that my story will bring some awareness to what we went through as a family. And I'm not saying I'm right with anything that I say. I know that I'm talking with a bias because it's an emotional topic, bringing your first baby into the world. And I just want to tell the story from my perspective, and I'm hoping that it will resonate with a lot of you and just help you to think about your life by hearing how our life went in January. So we did the first 2 trimesters in Canada. So the first 6 months, Nicolle and I were pregnant in Canada, and our goal the whole time, even though we don't tell you guys on YouTube our whole life, you know, we got to have a personal life, but our goal the whole time was to do our final trimester at our bug out location, which is in a tropical climate. And we're trying to link these 2 off-grid properties by growing tropical on one property and then temperate on the other property. And you guys, so far to this date, you've seen the temperate climate, and we're really excited to show you guys the tropical climate. We decided to have the baby near the tropical property because we really wanted to start planting fruit trees and building our home on this property. And this property is the one in the tropics that we're going to start showing you guys is not as remote as the Canadian property. It's still remote and it's hard to get to, and it's going to be an off-grid property with several acres, and it's going to be a fun adventure. But we could get in a car and drive an hour and a half to get to a hospital if we needed to here. And in Canada, it's so hard to get to that if anything were to happen, like me getting hurt or Nicolle needed any kind of care during her final trimester, then it would be very hard for us to quickly leave the property, get in the boat across the ocean, get in a vehicle 6 hours to the nearest hospital, and vehicle maybe 10 hours to a good hospital. And what if it's at night? You know, it would be really hard to boat across the ocean at night. So that was our rationale. We decided to come to where the hospital was an hour and a half away, just in case. But we wanted to go off grid with our pregnancy as well, and Nicolle has opened my eyes to midwifery, if that's how you say it, using a midwife and birthing more naturally, doing what's called a free birth or a home birth, and trying to take control of your birth story by putting yourself in the healthiest state you can be in, physically, emotionally, mentally, with diet and lifestyle. And we did this. We've been working with midwives in Canada and in the US from the start, And we have a beautiful midwife here that we were going to have help us deliver our baby, and we were going to do this at home. And so we knew that we didn't have a home yet on our bug out property here because it's just raw land. So we found an affordable rental in the area that our goal was to, here's a little break from roughing it so hardcore, and we'll give birth in this rental property that we can afford. And we had the water birth set up, we had a doula and midwife set up, and we had family coming out to assist, and we had our due date, you know, which was late in March. So here it is, January, and we're just really excited. We're giving Nicolle incredible food and nutrients and sun and ocean and fresh air and just beauty, and she's just the healthiest I've ever seen her, and she's just glowing. And it's just been a real privilege for me as a guy to, you know, be 10 years older than Nicolle. Before I met her, I thought maybe I'd be the guy who would never have kids, and being so in love with Nicolle and just loving the idea of starting a family with her, and you know, birthing a child into our family together. I loved seeing her journey. It was really great. So we started to have a lot of movement with our kid, and we started to have some practice contractions, these ones called Braxton Hicks. And then I found a person in the area that speaks Mandarin. I went to college and I lived in China for a while, and I love speaking Putonghua. So I was trying to do a few language lessons with this person, and 说中文. So I got back from my lesson of the day, and Nicolle made dinner, and it was really delicious. And she's talking about, she's gotten some practice contractions going on. Do I want to feel the belly? And I, of course. And they didn't go away. So it gets to be like 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, midnight. And the contractions are continuing. And we're both first time for having a baby. So we're looking up, you know, how long do Braxton Hicks usually last? How close together are they? How intense are they? And it just seemed to us that, you know, there was a little bit of a red flag going off. Why were these contractions lasting hours and hours and hours? It got to be 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning. Nicolle couldn't sleep because she was having to really, my whole life I've done martial arts, meditation, Tai Chi, Qigong, and I've been working on a lot of meditation techniques that have Buddhist and Taoist origins with Nicolle. She was having to pull from this meditation lessons that we've been doing just to get through these contractions. And I was getting nervous, but I wasn't showing it, but on the inside I was getting nervous. So we thought, let's not lay in the bed, let's get up and just walk around the house a little. Maybe like go outside with some fresh air and walk a few steps. And she was having trouble walking, even though she could walk. And then she started noticing that she's like, I don't think my water's broken, but I am getting a little bit of some water leakage. That's TMI for everybody out there. And that's what I'm thinking, you know, I'm as holistic and hippie as the next person, but I'm not ignorant to, you know, modern technology and modern people that can help you. I mean, I shattered my arm when I was 18, shattered it, 16 screws, 2 plates. I got a whole YouTube video where you can watch my story on that. And I had 2 surgeries, and I think, you know, modern medicine is incredible. If, you know, if I had had that kind of an arm break back in the day, it might have been an amputation. And to this day, I have a strong right arm because a good orthopedist was able to do a surgery on me and put pins and screws and plates in my arm, and my arm healed pretty good. So I said, we had called the midwife, our midwife, at like 3 in the morning. We got in touch with her by 6 a.m. and we said, can we please come see you? So she's on the way to the hospital. So we got in our vehicle, we went to see her, and she mentioned maybe we should go and take maybe a shot to slow the contractions down so that there wasn't a labor that was premature. And I just saw in her face, she's incredibly intelligent and one of the sweetest people we know, and we consider her a good friend, but I saw in her face, maybe I read her wrong, but I thought I saw in her face that she thought, you know, you might want to go to the hospital and see if anything serious is going on. So there was a moment where Nicolle and I said thank you to her, and we got in our vehicle and we just kind of cried in the car, because you don't know how hard how hardcore Nicolle wanted to do a natural home birth where we delivered the baby ourselves and where we kept the placenta attached for as long as we wanted, you know, whether that was 15 minutes or an hour, where we didn't have any beeping, any lights. We had fresh air coming in, music playing, loved ones around, candles, maybe water, maybe out of water. We just wanted that beautiful home birth, and we wanted to video it, you know, and we wanted to edit this video tastefully, and we wanted to share it with you because she really wanted to show people, you know, how beautiful a home birth can be and how healthy and how natural. But we also are, you know, smart enough to sit in that car and go, okay, babe, I think we need to go to the hospital and have a doctor make sure nothing is going terribly wrong with you or with our baby. Because we didn't want to go home and have these contractions turn real and be super premature and then deliver a baby that was in trouble. Or maybe something happens to Nicolle during the delivery and she's in trouble. And I don't know if there's any guys out there who have had kids, but all my thoughts were, at this point, were, I don't want to have a super healthy baby and lose the love of my life and be this widower raising this beautiful baby by myself. And I don't want to lose Nicolle if we do the home birth and the baby comes out needing help or is premature, and we could have seen someone else that wasn't part of our plan that could have helped our baby. And so I don't know if you know this about me, but I believe in spirituality, I believe in God, I believe in the elements, and I believe there is a spiritual connection with a creator, and I pray all the time, and I pray on my own terms with my eyes open when nobody knows I'm praying, and I connected with the source, with God, with whatever you want to call the creator out there, and I said, please, just let it happen where the baby comes out perfect, 100%, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, and let it come out where Nicolle is perfect, 100%. And we went to the hospital, you know, crying, because I know that Nicolle was disappointed because she knew that if we went to that hospital, it was going to be very difficult for us to leave and discharge ourselves, because we just knew that the system of nurses and doctors, administration, was going to want to keep us in that world and deliver with them. We just knew that was going to happen. So, but we had to make that decision, even though it wasn't it wasn't the path that we had set out for ourselves. So we went to the hospital that was nearby this new tropical raw land property, and we didn't realize that they didn't have an extensive NICU, and I know this word now, NICU, so NICU, so like an ICU, like you would go as an adult to the ICU, but a NICU is like the neonatal intensive care unit, right? So it's the intensive care unit for babies, for infants, for neonates. And I guess the hospital that is nearest to us, the hour and a half drive away, is very good as far as hospitals go, but they didn't have a very extensive neonatal facility. So we had Puma and Kai with us in the vehicle because we didn't want to leave them at home in case we didn't come back home. And we went to this hospital and checked ourselves in. We've got insurance, and we met with nurses and doctors. And so the doctor determined that you are premature, and our concern is that if we deliver your baby here at the hospital and something is needed for baby's health and survival, we don't have the means to help you at this hospital, but we want to put you in an ambulance plane, and we want to fly you to the hospital that's closest but the best one for caring for neonates, infants, small babies that are premature. I mean, I can't even tell you how difficult it is for a couple like us to hear all these things, because it's just way too much information. You know what I'm saying? It's overwhelming. Now we're in a new environment with all new people, with many, many nurses, with technicians, with multiple doctors coming in and out. Everybody is covered and dressed up because everybody at this facility is freaked out about COVID. And I think in addition to being freaked out, I think that agencies like the CDC are imposing rules that hospitals have to follow in order to keep their funding, or in order to keep their certifications, or whatever they have to keep them in the good. They have to follow CDC guidelines that are changing throughout this COVID pandemic. And so you can't connect with anybody. Everybody's face covered up, and it's very difficult when it's hard enough when you're at the grocery store talking to a clerk and you can't hear what they're saying through a mask, but it's very difficult when you're giving birth in a new environment that you didn't want to give birth in, and you're a little afraid, a lot afraid as a couple, and you're together holding hands, and now you're plugged in to the IV with the gown, and the gel's on your stomach doing the ultrasound, and everybody's running in and out, and no one's really connecting with you or talking to you like a human. They're kind of treating you like a patient and kind of like a client. Does that make sense? Not one person had the ability to like talk to us like a friend, which I felt that if you're in the business of helping and saving people and dealing with pregnant women and babies, you should have the ability to be empathetic and show a connection on a human level to the person that needs the care, and talk with language that allows them to be comforted. You know, I'm an expert in certain fields that these doctors and nurses are not experts in. And if I brought them into my world, I could use jargon that would confuse the hell out of them. But I wouldn't do that. You know, if they came into my world of editing or gardening or martial arts or off-grid living, I would give them a great experience, and I would talk at the level that they were at, so they would have an amazing experience with me. And I don't feel that any of the physicians or medical staff could do that for us. They were using jargon and technical language that only their industry understands. And you get the feeling that everyone in the room thinks that you're not intellectually on the same level as them, even though that wasn't said. That feeling comes across to Nicolle and I, and it just makes things worse. So we're feeling all these feelings, and now they're saying, you know, right now we got to fly you to this other hospital, you know, hundreds of miles away, and you're going to get in the hospital plane and go. And Jake can't come with you. And just, I mean, I'm really good at managing my emotions through meditation, and I'm usually really good under pressure. But that's a different kind of pressure when, you know, somebody wants to take my girl from me, and they want to take my baby from me, who I don't even know yet, and they want to take him away. And I said, why can't I come on the plane? Does the plane have 10 seats? Why can't I come? And they said, well, because of COVID. Because of COVID, they're only letting one person on the ambulance plane at a time. And I just said, this is ridiculous. I mean, I honestly said it to them. I said, this is ridiculous. You've got two people here who are soulmates, who do everything together, who for 4 years have been not out of each other's life for more than a day. And not only that, but at this time, we're so in love and so connected and so, you know, physically, spiritually, and mentally connected together. And you're gonna like rip us apart and take one hundreds of miles away. And then what am I supposed to do? Well, they said, well, you can get on another plane at the airport and you can go meet her at the other hospital, but you got to fly on another plane and you got to book that yourself. It was so hard to keep my cool, be professional. And then a nurse comes in the room and says, well, we got to go now. So I said, well, my dogs are in the vehicle, and I have a friend here that's about an hour and a half away that probably could watch them if I asked them nicely, if they were feeling gracious. And I have to go run my dogs, drop them off, and then go right to the airport and get on a plane. And I'm not gonna book the plane, I'm gonna just show up and say, what's the next plane heading to that location, and get me on it. And a nurse comes in and says, well, you probably shouldn't go. And I said, well, what? And she goes, we just ran Nicolle and we think she's positive for COVID. And that made us literally say to them, what? To come to this location, to leave Canada, we had to test, each of us had to test twice, doing the highest end PCR test that you can take. $300 a pop, and we're negative. And we just got to this location for only 10 days, and we haven't really seen anybody. We've been outside, and we've been kind of isolated because we are building an off-grid lot, and we're at a home by ourselves. And we have no symptoms. We're not sick. Both of us are as healthy as we've ever felt. So I think your test is wrong. I mean, honestly. And they said, well, we can't test you again, but we have to trust the test. So now we're going to have to put extra gear on in order to be in the room with Nicolle. And you shouldn't go because they're not going to let you be with Nicolle for the birth, because now that she's positive for COVID in the file, the hospital that we're flying her to is not going to let you get into the room because they have to isolate her for 10 days. You're telling me that I can't see Nicolle for the next 10 days? Yes. This is unacceptable. We live in the same bubble together. We're in the same bubble now. We live, sleep each other. We came here together. We're in the same room right now. If she's positive for COVID, I'm positive for COVID, and we're one. And I'm convinced that I'm not positive for COVID. I've taken 2 PCR tests in the last 10 days, negative each time. I have no symptoms. I'm not even sick at all. I've been living remote in the Canadian forest for 4 years. And I mean, I don't want to brag, but I think I have one of the healthiest, lifestyles and immune systems in the business. So they took Nicolle away from me. My beautiful friends were able to watch Puma and Kai. And I parked my vehicle at the airport, got on the plane, and went to the hospital that they flew Nicolle to. And I got there about an hour after she got there. And I get in, and now it's later on. It's about 10 or 11 p.m. And there's a security guard at the front desk that won't let me up to see Nicolle. And he said, well, it looks like your fiance is now under isolation because of COVID, and we won't let you up into the room with her. And I said, well, I'll be camping down here in the security lobby. And you can bring the police in to arrest me, and we'll make the local news together, and we'll be viral all over the internet, And so he got on the phone to the supervisor of the hospital, who was on call at that late hour. And 20 minutes later, this woman said, well, we will let you up into the room with her, but if you go up in the room with her, then you're in isolation too. We're going to consider you positive as well. And I said, well, both of us are not showing any symptoms, and we're both not sick, so that's not even a punishment. Let me in the room now. And but she said, you can't leave. If you leave, then you're banned. So that became the situation. I got let into the room, masked up, and Nicolle and I saw each other again after a little separation and break. We cried together, and I was there. And we didn't like the hospital food, so we were appreciative of the hospital food. We were grateful. But now we're in a place that was in a more happening city, so we were able to use like food delivery service to deliver some really healthy food to the room, and the good nurses brought it up to us. So we were able to kind of survive healthy as possible in this room for days and days and days and days. And we did. We didn't go into labor day 1 or day 2 or day 3, and the contractions kept coming, but they were not contractions of labor, and at least 5 or 6 doctors kept coming in on rotation all the time. And I kept notes on every doctor's full name, and I would look them up online. I would make a whole file of, this is Dr. So-and-so, and this is Dr. So-and-so, and this is Dr. So-and-so. So whenever they would come in, I knew them, even though half their face is covered. And it just became this waiting game of, would Nicolle go into labor, or would her contractions stop, and would her water leaks stop? And their concern is that if there was a puncture in her fluids, in her birthing fluids in there, would that create an infection? So they wanted Nicolle to take some antibiotics to block a potential infection, and they wanted to monitor her to see what would happen. And if her contractions went away, they were interested in possibly, they told us, inducing labor, because they wouldn't want her to stay for the remainder of her full term with a leak, if that's what was going on, because that could have bacteria and infection creeping inside of her, which could hurt the baby, hurt her. What would you do? What would you guys do? I mean, so honestly, now I'm praying, please let Nicolle go into labor, because I don't want to have her be induced, but I also want her to go into a healthy labor. And it looks like our child waited just long enough that on paper was able to hit a milestone of a certain amount of weeks that the hospital liked. They liked that they hit this milestone. I mean, I don't want to say much more than that. And it looks like, I think it was the 3rd or the 4th day that we were there together, we woke up, had breakfast, and then more intense contractions began. And they were much more intense, where now Nicolle was using some chanting that we had rehearsed together, using her warrior's sounds and warrior call, and using really skillful, beautiful breathing and postures on the knees. They were able to get a fitness ball in there with her, and between standing and walking and moving and kneeling and laying down just to sleep, bouncing on a fitness ball, she was able to move the baby into a great position that was very healthy and very conducive of a healthy birth. And she told them, I don't want any painkillers at all. And this woman did what I thought was a very beautiful thing. It was like, you know, a beautiful sports team going to somebody else's stadium and being incredible underdogs, and at somebody else's city, in somebody else's stadium, summoning up the power and the courage to win the game. And I don't ever cry, so I don't want to, but I was very emotional, not from the baby at all, honestly, just from Nicolle. I think she was very inspirational to me, because I don't think she realizes that she did the natural birth, and she did everything that she wanted to do with her birth story. She did it under the most difficult circumstances that life could throw at her. Taking her away from her midwife, taking her away from her family, making her go into labor way too early to where we were worried, and family couldn't be here with us. And the two of us were alone in a strange place, in a strange city. We didn't know anybody. And the constant beeping and hooked up to machinery and in the gown, and the floor is getting dirtier and dirtier every day that goes by, and I'm washing the floor by hand, trying to keep everything clean. And everybody coming in the room is dressed up as if there's nuclear waste in the room because of this positive COVID test thing that the first hospital gave to Nicolle, even though both of us still at this point are showing no symptoms and we're not even sick. They didn't even want to test me. They didn't even ask. And she said, I'm doing everything, no painkillers. Nothing through the IV, nothing with shots, nothing orally, no epidurals, nothing. And the doctors and nurses told us that every woman says that, and then when the birth gets more closer to, when the contractions get more closer to the actual birth, they usually opt in for the painkillers at the end. And they just don't see women anymore at the hospital that give birth without the painkillers. Women come to the hospital actually for the painkillers to help with their birth. And so it turned into this thing where Nicolle was kind of like this case study, because all the doctors that we spoke to told us that they just don't see women giving birth naturally in the hospital anymore. That was their experience. And I was just really touched. They left us alone most of the time. They would come in to check, And it was Nicolle and I in this strange room, giving birth together. And the hardest part about it was we wanted to know what was going to happen to our baby because the birth hadn't happened yet. So it turns out there's doctors that would come in that are going to assist with the birth and assist Nicolle and I. But then there's a second group of doctors that are from the NICU, from the neonatal intensive care unit at the hospital. And they're the ones that care for the baby. And I think 100% of the doctors that were caring for Nicolle and I and the birth were female, and 100% of the doctors that we saw, that were the NICU doctors, were male up to this point. We ended up meeting some female ones later, but up to this point, we had a call with the NICU doctor who was the head of the department, and I thought it was a really good conversation. He didn't come in the room with us in person, but he called us, and that became a very difficult part of this whole journey, was to speak with doctors during this moment on the phone. It was very hard. And I don't know what the doctor thought about us, but this doctor was the head of the department, and my questions to him was, what happens with our baby when our baby is born? We chose not to know the gender, so we don't want to know if it's male or female, and so we don't know what we're having yet. So what happens when he or she is born? Because he or she is premature, what is your policy? He goes, well, we're going to take the baby, assess the baby, and within 2 minutes, we cut the umbilical cord, and we take the baby from your room to the NICU to monitor the baby. And Nicolle and I are just crying. And we're going, so we're going to give birth to a baby, and then you're going to take the baby from us. And he said, well, I'm not in the business of taking babies from parents that are healthy. So if your baby, no matter what gestational age we think you are at, and we think that you're at a stage where your baby could be very healthy or could need some assistance. But if your baby comes out and is crying and is breathing and it's got good coloring and is keeping him or herself warm, and there's no other markers that are cause for concern, then we're not going to take the baby from you. But I said to him, we would love to keep the baby attached to Nicolle for at least 15 minutes because we believe in this connection through the umbilical cord of the sharing of blood after birth. When the mother gives birth to the baby, a lot of the blood and other nutrients that modern medicine, has to admit, there's lots that we don't know about yet with the human body. We believe that this connection is very healthy to keep for a longer period of time than 2 minutes. And he told me, I don't know if I can do that because I don't want to say yes and then your baby is attached for a long period of time and then I'm not there for the birth, and one of my doctors who's going to be there waited 15-30 minutes to cut the cord. Something happens and now we're liable. And I just had a hard time with that because in my brain now I'm hearing liable, and I'm hearing that, oh, you don't really, your main focus is to protect yourself from a potential lawsuit or a liability. And so you're going to do what the system says is correct on paper, regardless of what my baby needs. Is that correct? And then again, he reaffirmed that, no, I'm not in the business of taking babies from parents if the baby's healthy. And we're looking at warm, coloring, breathing, and things like that. And body weight, of course. And so we said, well, thank you, Doc, and hung up with him. And then it was about a day later, we go into labor for real. And I just never have seen anything as courageous as Nicolle. And I'm sure every parent that gives birth has their own story, but it wasn't just the birth. It was the fact that within a 4-day period, our birth plan went out the window. Nicolle had to get on a plane by herself. she had to fight COVID square in the face, where we've been in the forest and not as affected as other people. Well, now we were affected by COVID in this whole new way we never thought about before, which was COVID during a birth. And COVID as a divisive tool that was dividing the two of us and dividing possibly our baby from us. And despite all of that, she did her breathing, she did her chanting. She had no self-conscious ego with doctors and nurses in the room. Even though they've never seen a chanting, breathing woman before like that, I can tell. I can tell that the women that they've seen have never been in the positions that Nicolle was going into for healthy movement. They never heard a woman chant like her before. They never seen one breathe in the way that we had been breathing. And it was what Nicolle needed, and it's what enabled her to be her healthiest self, and later on we'll find out allowed us to give birth to a very healthy baby. And she didn't use one painkiller at all. She did it all natural. The only thing she let them do was she let them give her the antibiotics in case an infection came in, and they let her give her a certain variety of steroids, because they convinced us that since we're premature, it was important to give Nicolle a steroid shot because that would translate to the baby's lungs. And they were very concerned that the premature baby needs healthy lungs. And so we consented to do that because we thought, let's give our baby's breathing the best possible chance we can give our baby. And Nicolle gave birth in a hospital bed, which is not what she wanted to do. I wish they would have brought in a nice pool for us to give birth in water. And she gave birth. And it was just beautiful, because it was seeing a woman who was fully conscious and fully aware, who wasn't blocked by any kind of drugs. And she went through the full experience of birth 100% without any assistance from chemicals. You know what I'm saying? And so she was fully aware of every push and every change of cervix size and every stage of it. Nicolle was there, and she just did fantastic. And I literally blocked the doctors out, and I pushed them away as much as I could, and I got in the front, and I was saying, you gotta focus on the candle's flame and let everything else wash away. And there's no doctors in the room, there's no nurses. I'm sorry that Midwife is not here, but it's you and I. It's just you and me giving birth together. And it's just you and I. And he came out. And instantly he came out screaming and crying and breathing perfectly. And I can't tell, I wasn't able to enjoy any part of the birth, and I wasn't able to really even, I kind of did a really bad thing where I didn't really, my focus shifted away from Nicolle very quickly once he came out. And all I was concerned about was, is he needing help because of being premature? Or is he perfect even though he's premature? And the baby looked coloring-wise perfect. And the baby was warm. And he was crying and breathing the very first second. And even his eyes opened, and he was aware. And he was conscious. And he wasn't needing any life-saving surgeries. And he wasn't needing any life-saving assistance outside of the norm. If you saw a full-term baby born, and if you saw a baby born from our perspective, from Nicolle's and my perspective, this was a perfect, healthy baby that Nicolle and I could have given birth to ourselves at home. And then I started having a lot of problems, because then the doctors and the nurses, they've got a time crunch, and you can hear the NICU doctors all came in during the final 15 minutes of pushing. And so we kind of have two groups. We have a group of doctors and nurses assisting with the birth, and the group of doctors standing in the wings ready to assist with baby. And those baby doctors came in last minute. And they have the incubation bed ready to go and all their tools they need to send the baby off to the NICU. And she gives birth. They hand him to Nicolle, and she's holding him, and she's just, you know, connecting and talking with him. And then they're like, Dad, Dad, here's the scissors to cut the cord. And, you know, other people, friends in movies, you know, this is supposed to be a joyous thing. You know, the dad cuts the cord. God forbid the dad should do the delivery, which I would have liked to have done. But I would have had to physically push the doctors out of the way and deliver it, where I felt that my job was to take Nicolle's focus, to hold her hand and to be this close to her, and to do everything I could to get her to birth healthily. And I was the teammate and the coach for that. I felt that it wouldn't have been the best use of me to actually catch him coming out. And you can hear the NICU doctors in the background. And they're going, 30 seconds, 45 seconds, 60 seconds. They were counting down as if the clock was running down on the fourth quarter. They were counting down to this 2-minute window where on paper they're told to cut the cord and take the baby to the NICU. And I didn't want to cut the cord. I really believe in this connection. I wanted the baby to stay connected to Nicolle for as long as Nicolle wanted. And that was a minimum 15 minutes. And I just believe there would have been pumping of the cord that would have pumped blood into our baby, and it would have pumped extra nutrients to make him healthy. And what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to grab the scissors and say, really, I can cut the cord? It just felt demoralizing under the circumstances. I didn't want the cord cut after 30 seconds, 1 minute. And am I supposed to stall? Am I supposed to say, well, first, before I cut this, let me count every finger and toe and make sure they're all there. 1, 2, and am I supposed to make a scene and tell everybody, no, we're not cutting this cord, not for 15 minutes, until Nicolle says? Would I cause tension in the room and an escalation in forceful care? I mean, can everybody please just leave the room and let Nicolle and I be by ourselves with our crying, breathing, beautiful, perfect baby that we just gave birth to? Can you all please go out in the hallway and give us alone time, please? But if anybody was going to cut the cord and do things like that, it was going to be me. So I cut it. And then Nicolle birthed the placenta perfectly, and then my focus shifted with the baby, and they took the baby over to the NICU area of the room. And the doctor started just cleaning him up, wiping him down, and just assessing him. And they're talking to me because I went over there with him. And I'm looking at their faces, and I'm saying, how does he look to you? He looks pretty good to me. It looks like if none of you were here, he'd be just perfect with Nicolle and I. And they said, he looks great. Look at it, everything's how you want it. He's breathing, his coloring looks good, everything looks great. And I'm like, well, then he's going to stay with us, correct? And they told us no. He's going to go with us to the NICU. And you guys can't come because you're isolated here. And I thought it was my duty to take as much pictures and video with my phone as I could, because I wanted to, my weird brain works where I wanted to compare the baby I saw in front of me with the baby that I would see in the NICU eventually. And I knew I wouldn't have that association because I would not be with him. And I put my finger down and he held on to my finger. And I knew that would be the only time that I would touch him for quite a while, for an indeterminate amount of time. They wrapped him up and handed him back to Nicolle for a few extra seconds. And I can't even tell you the look on her face when they take him and take him. When they took him out of the room and we don't know where he's going. And the letdown of a successful birth and an emotional period of our lives. And all the doctors leave with the baby. And just one nurse remains with us. And we can't even look at each other because we'll cry more. And the only thing that could have given us solace and comfort was our baby. Where is he? There's no glass to look at him through. The door closes behind him. I'm sorry, the mosquitoes. And immediately they determined that Nicolle is in excellent shape and we should move rooms to a recovery room. And the nurse is pushing us to gather up our stuff. And I just said, can you please go out in the hallway and give us some private time for as long as we need? Do you need the room right this second? And the look on this nurse's face when I said that, I couldn't believe it. She was looking at me as if I was being unreasonable. Oh. It was a look like that. And she kind of, and she slowly walked herself out of the room, and she did give us that time, and we just cried together, and we didn't know what to do. Are we not going to see our baby for a month, for a week? What are they doing to him? I didn't feel this overwhelming sense of love now that I had a child, and I didn't feel this life-changing feeling of, I'm now a dad. I felt ultimate loss, and I felt, honestly, ultimate adrenaline and aggression, because I felt this animalistic emotional state in me welling up, putting me into protection mode, is go get your kid and protect him. But I just think that the weapon that we humans have that's most powerful is our brain, and I was trying to let my brain keep the rest of my body calm and say, the best thing you can do for him is to relax, determine whether he is perfect and healthy, let them put their chart together and determine on their end that he's healthy and perfect, and then let them discharge him to you as quickly as possible. But what Nicolle needed at that moment was our baby. Her body needed it, and her breast milk needed it, and her brain needed it, and her spirituality needed it, and her emotional state needed him. And I just don't know in what medical journal is it okay to take a healthy baby away from his mom and dad for an indeterminate amount of time, regardless of how many weeks you determine his age to be. Regardless. How come we couldn't have the doctor in the room that was the head of the department that had the phone call with us and told us, I'm not in the business of taking healthy babies from their parents? Because those NICU doctors who we didn't know before that moment when Nicolle gave birth, we'd never seen them before. They told us, he's looking perfect, he's looking great. This is exactly the kind of baby you want to see. And we're going to take him over to the NICU. So within a matter of minutes, they got Nicolle in a wheelchair, and I'm carrying all the gear, and we're going to another room. It's in a different section of the hospital, a recovery room, and this room is much smaller, and this room doesn't have the same facilities as the birthing room. So now we've got a fan in the room that's equalizing the pressure in the room, and it's so loud we couldn't even hear on the phone when doctors and hospital staff would call us. And it was just almost like torture. It was this loud, incredibly loud fan that we couldn't turn off. And we're now restricted to one hospital bed, and Nicolle and I had to share it to sleep that night, because we just recognized the fact that we have to get a couple hours of sleep in order to be mentally conscious and mentally sharp. And the hardest thing was to lay next to Nicolle, the girl that I love, and just feel this emptiness, that there's no Jake and Nicolle baby in our arms, completing the circle of our energy and our love. And I don't know if you understand that. Imagine, do you have kids out there? And imagine when you gave birth to your kids, if you gave birth to perfect, healthy kids that didn't need any life-saving surgeries or procedures, and within minutes after giving birth, they were taken from you to a place that you don't know for a length of time that you could not determine. And I felt loss. I felt a lot of loss in that recovery room. We're going to find out later on in the story that he was taken to an isolation NICU room. So even as an infant, he was being isolated. There were no other babies in the room with him. There were no other parents or families in that room. He was in his own room in an incubation bed, and he was alone in there, being checked on once in a while by the nurses that were on call. And I just don't understand why Nicolle and I couldn't have been told by the hospital, you're able to go into this isolation room with him if you want to isolate with him, and it could be a long period of time. But if you want to isolate with him in the room, since no one else is in the room, that would be an appropriate place for you to be as a family. That would have changed everything for us. Because our entire lives and our entire world had melted away, and all we wanted was our family. It didn't matter if we were in a room at that point or at our home. We just wanted to have him with us. I don't see why that solution wouldn't have been appropriate under the circumstances. So the next morning, we're told by the doctors that since Nicolle is doing so well, that if she wanted to be discharged, that we could. And so we had been in the hospital for so many days at this point, and we needed to have the ability to think and connect alone, and we needed the ability to shower and not have the chaos of the hospital and the beeping and the constant personnel coming in and out, waking you up and causing stress in your body, and the fan that was deafening us 24/7. And Nicolle said, yeah, I think it'd be a good idea if we discharge, but we're being discharged alone without our baby? I mean, and they said, yes, he's in the NICU. And to have to gather up all of our belongings again and look after Nicolle, and have her be wheeled out of the hospital to wait for an Uber to pick us up and take us to the hotel that we had booked close by the hospital, was one of the most painful things. Nicolle wasn't at the hospital from her own volition. We were there to give birth. It should be a joyous time, and we should be celebrating this healthy, beautiful experience that we did successfully as a couple. And our baby's being assessed, you know. It was just difficult because of the fact that he didn't come out with some emergency. He came out and it was just hard. He came out perfect and healthy. The doctor said, this baby's healthy, this is just what you want to see, this is great. And we're going to keep him away from you anyways. How are you supposed to leave the hospital without crying and without loss and without scattered thoughts? How? How are you supposed to check into a hotel and relax and recover if you're Nicolle without your baby? And we're like, what's he going through right now? Well, we're testing his blood and we're giving him an IV because the IV is carrying amino acids and sugars and electrolytes and nutrients he needs since he's no longer connected to Nicolle. And she's not there to breastfeed him. She's there to breastfeed him. We're right here. Let us in the room with him. And then it's possible if he stays longer than 4 days, the IV will no longer be appropriate for delivering, you know, the sugars and the electrolytes and amino acids and vitamins to him that he needs. So then we'll have to put a PICC line into him, and that will go through his leg into his heart and be a more appropriate delivery mechanism for delivering his fluids and nutrients. And to the guys out there, what would you do if it was you? Would you keep your baby? Would you trust yourself in that moment that this baby is perfect? He's staying with us. Would you go against medical advice? Would you potentially make a confrontational situation happen where they had to call in security because you were not going to give them your baby? Would you potentially let them label you as doing what's not in the best interest of your baby? Because at that time, you don't know. They're determining that he's a premature baby, even though he's in the 5-pound range and his body is keeping itself warm and he's breathing perfectly and aware and all the vitals are beautiful. And the nurses are telling us that he doesn't need the incubation bed. They're just doing that because that's what has to be done on paper. But when they take him out, he's holding his own temperature. And you know what would hold his temperature the best? Would be his skin attached to my skin, his skin attached to Nicolle's skin as we held him. and put blankets over him and held him against our bodies and generated that warmth together. That would be the best way to keep him warm. So why isn't that happening? Before we're discharged, they gave us a number. Here's the number for the nurses in the NICU, and you can call anytime and see how your baby's doing. Well, I want to be on the phone 24 hours a day with them. I want to play-by-play every second to know how my baby's doing. We immediately call, and the nurse tells us, hello, yes, we're here to check in on baby Nicolle, baby Jake. And they go, oh, do you have a name for your baby? No, we don't have a name for our baby. We don't want to name him yet. We didn't even know if we were having a boy or a girl to this point. And we're excited about having him with us and connecting with him before we give him a name. So we're in no rush. We don't want to pick a name because you tell us to. So he's baby Nicolle, he's baby Jake at this point. And we want, how's he doing? Please tell us anything. We're down here in recovery, a mess. And she didn't have much to tell us. The nurse said, well, he's doing great. He's breathing on his own, no oxygen needed. He's keeping himself warm, but we have his temperature set in the incubation bed just in case. And I said, anything else? Tell us about him. She said, well, I don't know. He's really cute. That's what she said. He's really cute. I can show you over Zoom. You could show us over Zoom. And this was an option for us. Is one time a day, they offered a 30-minute Zoom call with our baby from the incubation bed. I mean, this is the last thing that Nicolle and I want, but what are we going to say? No? Of course, we're just pining for anything. So yes, set up the Zoom. So they turned the Zoom on, they put the camera in front of him in the bed, and now we've got a FaceTime camera screen pointing toward him, and we got the nurse taking him out just to show us, but we don't want to stress him out, so we're saying just put him back in the bed and let him relax and rest in there, and we'll just watch him. And remember back in the day when maybe your mom or a friend or a family member used to watch the eagles on the mountain? There was this 24-hour live stream set up where you could just click in to the website and watch the eagles hatch, and the eagles have their family structure. I felt like that's what was happening in this case. They were just setting up a camera pointed at our baby, and we were in some dystopian place and universe where the only way we could access and see our baby was to schedule an appointment and go on the website and look at this digital window and see how he's doing through the screen. Second of all, we're so anti-screens. Even though we make this show for you guys, I'm against social media and the screens, and we're not gonna give our kid phones and iPads, and now from second one, he's got a screen right in front of his face because it's the only way that we can see him. And I'm screen recording on my phone the entire Zoom call because I know that after the call's over, all we're gonna wanna do is see him some more and take screenshots. This is all we have. It's just a very sad state of affairs. We're watching him on a Zoom call, like watching a YouTube video. And so of course every day I call the NICU, can we do that Zoom again? And I can't tell you how even more sad it was for us to leave the hospital, get in an Uber 5 minutes away, get to our hotel room, and just sit down on a random old hotel bed. And Nicolle no longer has her belly, and we haven't slept, and there's no baby. Like, nothing about this journey was hard for us. Like the birth, being new parents, we think of that as being exciting and fun. You know, we're not scared or afraid of that. Where's our baby? Where's our baby? Who has our baby? Why do they have our baby? Are we separated because of COVID? Are we separated because of premature? Why isn't our baby with us? And the next part of the story that was hardest for me is that as we were being discharged the next morning after birth from the hospital, we got a call from the infectious disease department of the hospital. This is before we went to the hotel. So Nicolle is about to be discharged 12 hours after giving birth, and the infectious disease department called us and said, well, it looks like we're gonna have Nicolle under isolation watch for 3 additional days. So we're not going to allow her to go to the NICU and visit your baby for 72 hours. And there was no amount of money I could pay anybody to, I mean, I would have had to have Keanu Reeves matrixed Trinity my way into that hospital, Kung Fu style, and I would have been thrown in jail. I can't even tell you how much discipline it took to stay calm during that situation. And I can't tell you how hard it was to not go get a giant poster board and stand outside the hospital using my social media of 10 million followers, which I have across all platforms, notify them. COVID is separating me from my beautiful baby boy, and be outside the hospital with a sign saying my baby's being kept from me because of COVID, and let every local media in the area pick up on the story. I want to do that so badly, but that wouldn't have helped the situation. And it would have been easier, I think, if he was needing the system because there was something they had to do on him to keep him from dying. But we felt he was being put through the system's checklist because just for the sake of completing the checklist. Nicolle and I didn't feel that he was actually in the NICU because he was needing care. And we felt that the number one place he could get care was with us. So infectious disease says we're going to keep Nicolle from going to the NICU to visit him for 3 additional days. And Jake, since you entered into Nicolle's bubble, her COVID bubble, on that first day at the hospital, we can't let you come to the NICU in 3 days. And I said, well, what do you mean? And they said, well, technically we have to stagger your isolation periods. So we can't start your isolation period until Nicolle's isolation period has finished. Because technically on paper, the very last second of Nicolle's final second of isolation, she could pass COVID to you. So even if you don't have COVID now and both of you are not sick and both of you are asymptomatic, the very last second of Nicolle's isolation period, she could technically give you COVID. And so to make sure you're both negative, we have to start your isolation period after Nicolle is cleared. So you can't come see the baby for 9 additional days. For almost a week and a half, we can't let you in to see your baby. I mean, where's the ration? What is this? What is this COVID? Is it AIDS? Is it Ebola? Is it hurting people at the same level as like influenza is or the cold is? Or is it really some kind of crazy virus killing everybody in its path? I can't believe that it's really that serious when for all the days we were in the birthing room together, we had pregnant nurses in the room with us. How could they let a pregnant nurse take care of us before we gave birth if this is really such a deadly disease? I just didn't understand. When I was in the lobby being discharged, I saw doctors and nurses leaving that had their physician identification on them. And I overheard one talking to another physician saying, I'm going home right now because all my children have COVID. And yet she's coming back and forth every day. She's caring for patients, going home to her COVID kids who she's positive have COVID, and then coming back to the hospital. And I just didn't see the rationale in that. And now we've entered into some kind of a twilight zone where we don't know how long our baby is going to be in the NICU, and we can't even go to the NICU to be with him because Nicolle has to wait 3 days, I have to wait 9. We're in a strange place, in a hotel. And now we have to start producing food for baby because Nicolle is delivering premature. We've got to get some colostrum and breast milk going because our baby needs Nicolle's nutrition. The baby does not need IV nutrition in our opinion. He needs Nicolle. And Nicolle would be producing better if baby was against her, if crying and hormones were being shared. So now you've got a situation where I'm at home trying to massage and assist Nicolle to produce even a drop of anything. And we successfully were able to do that. We were able to take some little vials, we were able to fill those vials up. Nicolle, using holistic teas and nutritional shakes and fresh fruit and fresh juices, I was keeping her fueled with the best stuff on earth, and she was able to fill those little vials up. And then at 3 in the morning, I was hopping in Ubers at 3 a.m. and running those vials to the hospital and in a cooler with ice, passing them off to the nurses who were meeting us down the lobby. And they were taking this colostrum milk up to our baby and taking Q-tips and dipping it in the milk / colostrum and rubbing it in the cheeks of our baby, and then taking some and squirting it in baby's mouth, trying to give him every drop that was possible that we were producing. And then a couple vials turned into more of a canister, and then a canister turned into more of a bottle. And so over this 3-day period, Nicolle and I were producing milk together as a team. And I was the mechanism running it back and forth every time we got enough for baby to drink. And it was like a competition. You know, I was trying to win, and winning meant giving nutrition to our baby. You know, I couldn't touch him, and he couldn't touch me back. And he couldn't touch Nicolle, and he couldn't take the nutrition directly from Nicolle. But I sure as hell was going to go and give every drop of that stuff to him. And so I was forcing Nicolle to get a few hours of sleep in graveyard shift, and the rest of the day we were pumping and pumping and pumping. And on that 3rd day, as soon as midnight happened, when it was midnight a.m. and the 3rd day had technically started, we were there at 11:45 waiting for that minute, like it was Black Friday and the store was opening, and she went in there. But they would never let me in. And nothing I could do would convince them. And I know this is a long-winded video, and I don't know if any of you are even wanting to watch this. I hope you skip ahead or watch it at, fast speed, but thanks for letting me tell my story. Before we had been discharged, that same morning that the infectious disease department called us and told us that my isolation period was going to be after Nicolle's, so I had to wait 9 days. I told them, come down and test me for COVID. Let me test negative and get in there now. And they said, well, that won't help, because even if we come down and test you with the highest end PCR test we can give, if you test negative, the test sometimes can produce false results. And I just have a big problem with this, because how can you trust the results of Nicolle's positive test but not trust the results of a potential negative test that I would take so I can see our baby? I don't get it. I said, well, you're not going to start my isolation period until Nicolle's isolation period ends in 3 days. What if you come down here to our room right now before you discharge us and give me a test and I test positive? Wouldn't that mean that you were sure that I had COVID now and my isolation period could start today, and then I wouldn't have to wait till hers ended, I could start today? And they agreed. They said, actually, that actually is true. I said, well, you get your little butts down here. I didn't say that, but in my head I said that. You come down here, you test me now. And they did. A doctor came down and tested me for COVID. And I had the result in an hour, and I tested negative. I had no COVID. I just don't understand how Nicolle and I are so intimate together, and how we are as close as any couple you've ever seen. How can she test positive and I test negative when we share everything? How can you trust Nicole's test at that first hospital, but you're not trusting my negative test so I can get in to see our baby? There was nothing I could do to see the baby. I would have had to have gone in to the NICU and say, well, I want what's called a DAMA, or a DAMA. I want a discharge against medical advice. And that kind of freaked me out because I didn't want to go into the hospital and say, no, we're not leaving here without our baby. And have the hospital label us as a discharged couple against medical advice. I didn't want something else to happen where, like, what if the hospital, the what if started entering my brain. And one of the what ifs I was thinking of, what if the hospital wanted to say, well, we don't think that you have the best interests of your baby in mind, so we're going to assign a lawyer and a social worker to you and monitor you into the future. And I was trying to stay low under the radar and be a good parent. And if there was a system that they had to adhere to that I'm hoping was in the best interest of our baby, I was having to trust that system to a point, and it was very difficult to do so. It was very difficult to do so because every doctor coming in the room was talking to us like we were 13-year-old single parents. Every doctor coming in the room was talking to us as if we had no formal education and were an inferior intellect. This is how Nicolle and I felt. And we felt that way because it was happening. And I really think that if any doctors or physicians or nurses or hospital administration or infectious disease personnel is watching this video, you really have to have a new department added to every hospital across the country called the Emotional Connection Department. And as important as the surgeons, and as important as the NICU, and as important as infectious disease, I think all your policy should be greatly created with the help of this Emotional Connection Department. And you should be better at learning how to talk to people. And doctors, nurses, hospital staff, you should be better at, even though you're seeing a ton of people in very stressful times of their lives, you have to have the ability to connect with them in a conversive and emotional way. You have to have the ability to use your jargon to your colleagues and to your staff, but you have to use language that your patient and your clients, Nicolle and I, can understand during the moments of stress. And you didn't do that. You didn't ever connect with us in a way where we felt that we had a friend and that we had an ally. And for instance, our midwife does that. She's delivered hundreds of babies, and she also has the ability to connect with you and talk to you as if you're her best friend while she's successfully delivering babies. I just think you need to do that better in medical system. You need to talk with people on a very friendly human level and use language that everyone can understand. Because if you came into my world, I would do that for you. There became this period where Nicolle on that third day got to go into the NICU, and then I lost Nicolle. I didn't see her again because she's not gonna leave the NICU. So she's in like a lazy boy type of chair that kind of reclines a bit, and she's having to work with the nurses to care for our own baby. Even though Nicolle has a lifetime of knowledge with infants and caring for young children. She's done this professionally for a long time. But now, in our relationship, Nicolle and I both do certain things very well. And when we're separated, and Nicolle's having to produce milk and take care of our baby, she's not able to give her undivided attention and energy to the system who's coming in the room and telling her things. That should have been my job. I'm supposed to be there to support Nicolle and handle all these difficult conversations so that she can focus on baby. And when the hospital split us up, even though we never showed symptoms and we weren't sick and I tested negative, what you did was you kind of cut Nicolle's arm off because her partner wasn't able to be there to throw her the basketball so that she can dunk it. She had to dunk the ball, pass the ball, jump up and tip the ball and steal the ball all herself. And it just became a fool's errand. It's impossible to do. So I'm bringing her as much nutrition as possible. But I was afraid that if I met her down the lobby, they might not want us to be together because they wanted me to have this isolation period. So I was having to take food, drinks, nutrition, baby wipes, cleaning agents, toothpaste, toothbrush, trying to keep her healthy and clean and going and fully infused with nutrients so she can produce milk. I was having to bring it to the hospital, drop it off emotionlessly with security, leave the hospital, and then use my phone to text her, okay, the next shipment's downstairs. She had to come down on her own, pick up the shipment, and go back up to the baby. This happened for 5 days. And the difficult part was we don't know at that time how long does the NICU want to keep our baby. So what they did was they took a dad who's really good at researching things, who has a college education, and has also been a business owner my entire life. I've run my own company since I was 20 years old. And so I have a very practical way of thinking about the world, because I don't just ever dial it in and put in the hours. I've always had to work to where I've had to be successful to make it, because when you're in business for yourself, or you have a staff, or you have a company, or you have a lot of expenses, you have to put in the work that's going to matter. So now you've taken this mentality, a person, me, and you've put me in a hotel room, and you've given me no purpose other than feeding Nicolle and then researching what's going on with these NICUs. So I start looking up NICUs. How do they work? How do they function? Who are the doctors at this particular hospital that we're at? But how do NICUs function across the United States? And I started learning about some statistics that I thought I would read to you that I don't know if they're true or not, so I'll put a disclaimer on them. These were from different scientific journals that I read online, and you can go look it up yourself. But here's the stuff that I found that was impactful to me. So this person did a study of NICUs that lasted for 15 years, from 1980 until 1995. And this person found that the growth in the supply of NICU care has exploded in this time. And I started researching that, wow, NICUs have become very well attended by babies. So what this person found is that by studying NICUs from 1980 to 1995, the growth of the supply of NICU care has greatly outpaced the need of NICU care. And during this 15-year period, the number of hospitals grew by 99% in the US. But the number of NICU beds grew by 138% in that same period. And the number of neonatologists, the number of NICU doctors, grew by 268% during this period. So how come in a 15-year period from 80 to 95 in the US, how come babies are always being born, hospital growth increased by 99%, but the amount of NICU infant neonatal doctors increased by 268%? Why would NICU doctors increase so much more than hospitals have increased? So I get a call about this time from the NICU wanting to just give a call to our insurance to set up the new baby's insurance with all the bills that were coming our way from the NICU. And I said, okay, here's all the information. And the NICU person with billing said, yeah, it's good that we're getting everything set up now because the NICU is the most expensive part of the hospital. That's what she said to me on the phone. And I said, okay, here's all the information, and I hung up with her. And I started thinking, the NICU is the most expensive part of the hospital. I never thought of it that way. And I started thinking, why would that be the case? Is it because everything in the NICU is more tech savvy? Is the technology better, more advanced? And I don't know if I'm convinced about that. The NICU is the most expensive part of the hospital. Her words, not mine. Because of this phone call with hospital billing, I started thinking further, and I found a second study that talked about NICUs in more of a modern context. This study followed NICUs from 1995 until 2013, and it found that during that time period, 95 to 2013, the average NICU increased its capacity of beds by 65%, and the amount of NICU doctors, of neonatal doctors, increased by 75%. So the increase happened again after 1995. But the study said that the amount of babies being born was virtually unchanged. So how come there's all these increases from 1980 to 1990s, and then 1995 to 2013, beds, 65% increase in the NICU. Neonatal doctors, 75% increase. And this study was posing the question, are the NICUs increasing their capacity because there's a need for more neonatal care? Or is the capacity increasing because there's competition within hospitals for babies? And as a business owner and a businessman since I've been 20 and now I'm 40, I always think with kind of a business brain. And I see the money, personally, in my opinion. I can't have hospital billing call me and tell me the NICU is the most expensive part of the hospital and not think about the money. I just can't stop myself from thinking about money in that way. And so now I'm starting to think, I'm alone in my hotel. I don't have my baby. I don't have Nicolle. We're divided and conquered. I'm still on no sleep. I'm running Nicolle supplies. She's giving milk to baby. And we're being told by the doctors and the nurses, your baby needs this. Baby needs that. Baby needs bilirubin checked because we don't want jaundice to creep in. But the hospital room the baby's in is completely isolated from sun. And for 3 days after birth, we didn't let baby breastfeed from mom. We're not allowing baby to be with mom for 3 days. Now we're not allowing baby to be with dad for an additional 9 days of isolation. And how much extra physical, emotional, mental, spiritual stress is this putting on Nicolle's body when she's supposed to be focusing on recovery and production of nutrients for the baby and just love for the baby? And the system, not only COVID, but the NICU is throwing a lot of blocks in the way of us being a family. And that's how we felt. And we wouldn't have felt that way if from second one, they would not have taken our baby away from us. We wouldn't have felt that way if they would have said, here's how we're gonna keep you and your baby together. Let's think of a solution. If that doctor who talked to me, the head of the department of the NICU, told me, well, we don't wanna separate you from your baby. So if your baby comes out healthy, strong, warm, breathing, and of healthy weight, etc., if all the markers are set, here's how we're gonna keep you all together. We're going to bring your baby to an isolation NICU room, which happened. Why couldn't the doctors have said to us, we're gonna give you and your fiance the option of coming into the NICU isolation room with your baby and isolating there as a family of 3. Now you can't leave again, but I don't think you want to leave because you want to be with your baby. And we can allow you all to isolate together as a bubble family in that room. The room was separated from other babies. We wouldn't be walking the halls of the hospital. We would have been isolated there, the same way we were isolated in the birthing room for days before Nicolle gave birth. Maybe I'm not a smart man, but I didn't see what the problem was with that one solution. And if you're telling me that you've been a NICU doctor for 30 years and you're successful now as a physician of neonatals, I don't understand how you couldn't think of a million other solutions that would have kept the baby healthy, covered yourself from liability, but also kept us together as a family. I don't think there was any need to separate us. I feel that the harm you did to the baby and to us was more by separating us and divide and conquering us than you gave to our baby by taking him away from us. Do you follow what I'm saying? I feel that the harm of separating us was greater than the pros that you gave our baby from taking him to the NICU. And the last thing that this second article said is that 30 years ago, the most common reason that a baby would have been admitted to the NICU was because of low birth weight. And this article said that the NICU likes to think about extreme low birth weight as like 3.3 pounds or less. Our baby was in the 5-pound range. And this article said that 30 years ago, the most common reason a baby was going to the NICU was for low birth weight. But what they found is that in 2017, 48% of infants admitted to the NICU after birth were of normal birth weight. And I'm reading these articles, and I could have found a million others like this that, you know, were posted in peer-reviewed places. And I was thinking to myself, why would 48% of NICU babies admitted to the NICU be of normal birth weight? When in the old days, 30 years ago, which wasn't that long ago, they would have been admitted most commonly for low birth weight. And then I start looking up what are some of the bills that people get from the NICU that then they pass off to their insurance. Whether insurance pays for it or whether we pay for it out of pocket, we're all connected in this world. If insurance is paying for all of these fees and they're inflated from hospitals, we all have our fees go up. You know, if inflation goes up for something, we all feel that. So I really believe that it's not always about looking after your own butt, but it's about doing what's correct. And I start realizing that a lot of families have been put into bankruptcy because of their NICU stays. And commonly, a NICU stay for a baby can be anywhere from $3,000 to $10,000 per day or greater. And I got to tell you, for 8 days in the NICU, Nicolle and I got a bill that, you know, will be submitted to our insurance, but the bill for our NICU stay for 8 days was close to $70,000. I mean, $9,000 plus a day. And I just don't know what I think about that. Maybe I'm, you know, a person of not very high intellect, but it does seem to me that the NICU is a very profitable place. And if nothing else, there has to be the mindset that there's a very large conflict of interest here. Don't you think? I'm not saying there is. I'm saying, doesn't it seem like there is? That how can you be telling parents or helping a baby when they're worth so much money? And every single day that the baby stays in the NICU, it could be $3,000 to $10,000 more every day or greater. And a baby like ours that wasn't needing, you know, heart surgeries or lung surgeries or blood transfusions or anything like that, or wasn't needing months and months of care for 8 days, $70,000, I just found it very difficult to swallow. And then while he was in the NICU, we were having daily meetings with the doctor. So those meetings, how they went was, Nicolle's in the room. She's got the phone on speaker because I had to attend the meeting remotely from the hotel room via speakerphone. And so now I'm hearing the doctors give the assessment of our baby once a day. When the nurses that were caring for our baby during graveyard shift, when Nicolle was there with them, nurses with 30 years of experience were telling us privately they didn't know why our baby was at the NICU, that our baby seemed incredibly healthy and should have been discharged. The nurses can't say that publicly because they'd probably get fired, but they're telling us privately they've seen a lot of babies and ours is, you know, one of the healthiest they've seen. They weren't even sure why they were at the NICU. And then during these meetings, we hear the doctors referring to the babies as intakes. The intake this, the intake that. There's more intakes coming, intakes. They called the babies the intakes, which I thought was just very kind of not very human way to think about babies. And I kept telling them, hey, we would like to be discharged. If our baby is meeting all these markers and looking healthy, we want to be discharged from the hospital because we now believe the hospital has run its purpose and the baby being home with us is the healthiest way to go. And I had to be professional and I had to be to the point and I had to try to convince the doctors our baby's best interest is not in the hospital with you anymore. But they kept telling us that they don't like to discharge the babies that soon in just 8 days. because they want to monitor the baby for, you know, for a longer period of time to make sure that no jaundice comes in, or that there's no heart problems happening, and that the baby's not having any digestive organ problems digesting the breast milk. And I'm just seeing now, I'm seeing 6 days go to 7, go to 8, and then my brain is going, this potentially could become 2-3 weeks in the NICU for a baby that the nurses are telling us shouldn't be there privately, you know, at night. And then Nicolle overhears them saying how they've had a run of intakes coming into the hospital, and that means there's been a lot more babies coming in that are potentially, you know, smaller and more premature than our guy. And so then on that 8th day, I told them, hey, no more Uber. I've rented a car. I've purchased a car seat. So we're ready to go. We've booked another appointment with a pediatrician in the area for 2 days later so that we can bring our guy home and then still go check in with a pediatrician before we head to our home. Let's get him out of there. You know, we're in a position where we got our car ready to go. Let's put him in the car and get him home to us. It wasn't until Nicolle overheard them saying we have more intakes coming that then they said, okay, we're going to discharge you because we need the room. She heard them say that they needed the room. And so that's when on the 8th day, the discharge happened very quickly. And that's another hard pill for me to swallow when I feel that our guy was only discharged when other intakes were waiting in the wings. And if those other babies hadn't come along, I feel that they would have kept our baby longer. And that to me means that our baby wasn't being kept in the NICU because he needed it, but he was being kept there because there was no other demand coming in behind him. This is how my brain thinks about the situation. So I gotta say that, you know, I'm in love with doctors, I'm in love with nurses, and I love how these people take care of us during our times of need. I had no idea who the doctor was who healed my arm and gave me the 2 surgeries I needed to heal my arm. But that guy, he put me to sleep with the team, and he healed my arm to where I didn't need a cast and I was able to move it. And I'm so thankful to a doctor like him showing me compassion. And I'm so thankful for doctors and nurses for showing compassion. But this experience, this time, with our baby and with Nicolle, I felt like an intake. And I felt like a business deal was going on. And Nicolle and I felt that we were being talked down to constantly. And I didn't feel that any life-saving treatment was being done to our baby, but he was there because the system said on paper, we have to cover ourselves. He has to stay here for a certain amount of time. And I just have a hard time swallowing that these babies are worth so much money. Every day these babies are in the NICUs, it's worth so much money. Let me talk about God for a second and spirituality for a second. Let's go back to my prayers this whole time, even before we left Canada. My prayers have always been to the Creator, to the universe, to the earth, to the seasons, to God, whatever you call the force that created us, and whatever you call this force. I prayed for a healthy Nicolle and a perfect Nicolle. I prayed for a healthy baby and a perfect baby, mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally. I prayed for this. And I said, please God, if I'm gonna be pregnant with this woman, let her be safe and healthy. And after she gives birth, let her be with me for a lifetime and raise our children together. And let our baby be perfect and be the most physically and emotionally and spiritually and mentally capable human beyond the gifts that you've given me and Nicolle. And maybe God gave me this gift. And maybe God said, well, I'm gonna give you this blessing, but this is how it's gotta be, Jake. It's got to be this. It's got to be this way. It's got to be through the airplane ambulance. It's got to be through the hospital. It's got to be through the NICU. And if you do this, then you're going to get the perfect healthy baby, but the cost is going to be you don't get to be with that baby the first 8 days of his life. I'm thankful, and I feel blessed because our baby is perfect, and he's come home to us perfect. And the hardest thing about this new life as a dad was navigating that system for those 2 weeks of Nicolle and now baby. And I would have loved to have those 8 days back. And no amount of money can do that. I missed those first 8 days. When I was on the phone with one of the NICU doctors, after he had gone to the NICU, I said to this doctor, please let me do anything. I'll test again. I'll isolate. I'll do whatever it takes to be there with him. Please get creative and find a way to meet your guidelines from the CDC, but let me be with my baby. Please. I'm crying to this doctor on the phone who I don't know. I'm at the hotel room crying with this doctor, but trying to keep it together to sound intelligent so they don't think I'm some crazy person. And I said, I don't want to miss out on the first 10 days of my baby's life because of this COVID isolation. And then when Nicolle finally gets there, I don't want to miss out on being there for Nicolle and baby together. And I also don't want to miss out on the milestones of the first 10 days of baby, me, Nicolle as a family, and especially of being there to see Nicolle and baby as mother and son. And she said to me, you're not missing out on anything in the first 10 days. The doctor said this. She said, I don't think you're missing anything in the first 10 days. You're not missing any milestones. And Nicolle and I took such offense to this conversation. We really, really felt that that was a rude thing to say because that was not based on scientific fact. That was her opinion. And Nicolle and I wholeheartedly disagree. We think there might have been 1 million plus milestones that we missed out on not being with him since second one. But I'm grateful to God. I'm grateful to the blessings that I have been given as a human being on this earth, having this incredible experience of life. I'm so grateful that now from this day on, I have my beautiful, healthy soulmate partner, and I have this beautiful, perfect, healthy baby boy. And the cost was the first 8 days of his life. And I don't know what to think about that yet, but I'm grateful and I feel blessed. Thank you for listening to my story, the way that I saw it as the dad. And I don't even know why I made this video. I hope that it meant something to you, and I hope that you learned something and it changed your perspective in some way. And I would love to know what you think in the comments below. All right, Fox, are you ready for an adventure? And I'm so proud of you for the way you gave birth to him. It was inspiring for me, and I feel like we're on the other side of some other dimension, and you and I, we did it.
Yeah, we made it through the crazy war, right?
Yeah, but I'm just thrilled that all of my wishes and prayers and thoughts and intentions were answered, and you're here with me right now, and you're beautiful, and you're 100%, and you're still my partner, and I'm so glad to be going on this journey raising our little guy together, and look at him.
Yeah, he's perfect.
He's perfect.
He's like, yeah. Even though it wasn't our ideal or our birth plan, you know, and it was crazy, we got a really great little guy out of it.
He looks like he's got all his toes, all his fingers,
Yes.
his ears, his eyes, his smell, his taste, his brain,
Yeah.
and hopefully his spirit.
Yeah.
And he's a funny guy. He's got a good emotional state. He's a funny guy.
Yeah. He makes some very funny facial expressions.
I think that Nicole's in love with somebody else more than me.
It's a different type of love. It's a different type of love between you and him.
She's got this incredible bassinet for him, made out of all natural materials, and he hasn't even been using it because Nicolle loves to bring him into the bed with us and pull him right close to her. And then, what do you like to do?
I just like to just cuddle him.
That's not, well, yes, but yesterday you said to me, you said, I love his smell. I love to pull his face right next to mine and smell his breath. It smells so good.
I didn't say it smelled good. It's just, I don't know, I'm just so addicted to him. And he just smells like a baby. And I don't know, if he happens to breathe on me, I'll take it in. No, we're very blessed and very happy. I think we came out of this whole situation stronger and more in love, and you know, it gave us more of a drive to be off the grid, you know, even though we already are, but to be even more off the grid and to be out of the system. You know, I feel like it gave us that drive. Does that make sense?
To me, yeah. All right, Fox, you ready for an adventure?
Oh yeah, he's ready.
He looks like our little fox in that wrap.
Okay, let's go, little man.